Amazing millionaire saves 3 starving triplets. What he discovered the next day was heartbreaking. Jack Thompson gripped the steering wheel with a sense of urgency as he navigated the familiar streets of Maplewood, a town that now felt like a ghost of his past. His grandmother's recent passing echoed in his mind. Her laughter, her stories, and the warmth that had shaped his childhood now replaced with a hollow ache. He had spent nearly 2 decades building a life far removed from the modest suburban town. The high-rises and fast-paced hustle of city life consumed him, yet here he was, pulled back by loss. Each corner of Maplewood whispered memories of struggle and resilience, a place where dreams thrived amidst hardship. Jack's heart raced with the tension of returning to his roots. The architectural firm he had carved his reputation at demanded every ounce of his attention, molding his identity into that of a successful millionaire. But in this nostalgic landscape, resentment stirred within him. Would his hard-earned success mean anything if it was rooted in a past he seemed to have buried? Then he saw it. A dilapidated house at the end of a worn-out road, its walls peeling as if shedding years of neglect. A flood of memories rushed back, playing in the yard, running free. Drawn by a sense of compassion, Jack's instincts screamed to investigate further. To his shock, 3 young boys huddled by the rickety porch, their gaunt faces betraying the pain of hunger. Something shattered within him. It struck a chord deeper than he could initially comprehend. They looked like him in his childhood, starving for connection, chewing on hope. He pulled over, inviting them into his world, a world of warmth and abundance. His heart pounded. What was he thinking? Bringing them to his place? Could he possibly juggle his burgeoning career and care for these boys? Yet, as he watched them devour the food, he was filled with an intense desire to protect them, to be the father figure he'd never thought possible. But as the days turned into nights, that feeling of joy was twisted with unrelenting pressure. Their mother was missing, a specter in their lives, trapped within the chains of systemic poverty that Jack had long escaped. He found himself questioning the very sleek architecture of his life. Success, prestige, would it ever outweigh the love that now filled his house? The boys had rooted themselves in his heart, yet the weight of responsibility was suffocating. Spinning further into chaos, authorities showed up, echoing his fears like an intrusive siren. They threatened to take the triplets away, a mere numerical evaluation of their well-being, dismissing the bond he had forged. In that moment, Jack's resolve hardened. He could feel the noose of fate pulling tighter around them, each potential outcome more heartbreaking than the last. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Jack discovered the heart-rending truth behind the boy's mother, one that mirrored the struggles he thought he had escaped. The injustice of her circumstances clawed at his conscience. Did he have the stamina to fight against the very system he had distanced himself from? Despair mingled with determination. Each agonizing moment solidified the urgency to protect the boys, yet the looming reality of losing them gnawed at his core. The boys were on the cusp of adoption, not by a loving family, but a wealthy couple seeking to profit from the scores of benefits, their motives unbearably hollow. In the tension of those revelations, Jack found himself standing at a precipice. As pressure surged, he could no longer distinguish between the man he was and the man who was emerging in this battle for connection and hope. Would he risk everything for a future that hung in the balance? Or was this already a losing fight? A storm was coming, and Jack was right in its eye. Even amid the chaos, Jack's mind began to churn with possibilities. The stark reality was pushing him toward a decision he never imagined he'd face.
His life had been meticulously organized. Work dominated his existence. And yet, confronting the mother's tragic absence and the sinister motivations of the prospective adoptive parents had unveiled a raw vulnerability he had not allowed himself to feel in years. With a clenched jaw, Jack found a makeshift strategy percolating. His instincts urged him to become an active player in the battle for the boy's well-being, rather than a passive observer waiting for fate to intervene. Were the connections he had forged in the city worth relinquishing for the chance to protect the triplets? Could he harness the skills that had brought him accolades in the corporate world to advocate for a cause far more significant? He envisioned leveraging his professional contacts to initiate a grassroots campaign aimed at raising awareness. Delicately, he began plotting the steps. There were channels within his firm, potential sponsorship opportunities, connections that could perhaps elevate this struggle beyond just one man's fight. The thought of sharp suits and necessary meetings felt vital for the first time. His work could serve a new purpose, intertwining business acumen with personal resolve. However, the looming specter of doubt loomed large. How could he present himself to his colleagues, once colleagues of elegance, now drenched in the pathos of a struggle they might never fully understand? Jack could sense the eye rolls before they even occurred. The whispers would start once they learned he was risking it all for 3 boys. What would they think of his motives?
Would he be seen as a man in crisis, or a man who had lost his bearings? That night, as shadows danced across his living room, Jack found himself overwhelmed. The boys were asleep, but their presence lingered. He could see the gentle rise and fall of their bodies. He could hear their quiet breaths. It reaffirmed his resolve. This isn't about saving them from a system. This is about giving them what he never had: stability, love, and a chance to thrive. With each passing hour, Jack made a list of steps he needed to take. The first was reaching out to an old friend, a child welfare advocate who had worked with similar situations. His palms were slick with sweat as he picked up the phone, every beep on the dial a reminder of the crossroad he was now at. But the scariest part of this venture was the realization that this fight might expose weaknesses he had long buried. What if he faltered? What if his efforts to rally support resulted in failure? The vulnerability punched deeper every time he internalized these fears. Yet he understood. True growth came through confronting the darkest corners of oneself. Making the call took more courage than he had anticipated, but the voice on the other end was calm and receptive. Ideas flowed back and forth like a reassuring tide. It filled Jack with a renewed sense of hope, awakening passion long dormant. But just as he hung up, a knock at the door shadowed the fragile peace. Jack's stomach dropped. He opened it to find 2 figures in dark uniforms, the childhood specter of authority returning to haunt him. They were back to assess the situation with the boys. His heart raced. Every inch of him braced for the worst, knowing he had not yet fully set his plans in motion. In that moment, Jack understood one undeniable truth. Time was not on his side, and the battle for the triplets' future had only just begun. All at once, his bigger plan sprung into action, and a fierce resolve ignited within. But would it be enough? The truth hung in the air, thick with tension, and Jack knew the time for passive consideration had long passed. The time had come to face the unyielding system head-on. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the weight of a broken system crush them all? As the door swung open, Jack braced himself against the sudden rush of anxiety that clawed at his insides. The 2 social workers, clad in dark, authoritative uniforms, entered his home like a storm, immediately assessing every corner of the living room, glancing pointedly at the scattered toys and clothes. Jack felt their gaze pierce through him, searching for signs of inadequacy. It was a suffocating power play, and he struggled to maintain any semblance of composure. "Mr. Thompson," one of them began, his voice even and cold, "we need to discuss your current living situation with the triplets." Jack nodded, forcing himself to breathe deeply. This was his chance to demonstrate not just that he could provide a safe home, but that he could be so much more. He focused on their words, pulling together the threads of his rapidly spinning thoughts. He had only a few moments to shape their perception of him and convince them that he was not the man lost in a personal crisis, but a determined fighter for the boy's future. He spoke calmly, detailing his plans for advocating for the triplets, his desire to reach out to his network and raise awareness about their situation. Each word was carefully chosen, a calculated strategy meant to mask his rising panic and to reveal a man reborn, one ready to transcend the confines of corporate success. But their expressions remained inscrutable, as if they were evaluating him as both a protector and a potential risk. The larger implications of his decision weighed on him. What if they deemed him unfit? The thought sent a flicker of doubt through his resolve. Had he miscalculated, thinking he could transform his metal into something noble? His palms began to sweat anew, but he pressed on, challenging himself to unearth a confidence long buried beneath layers of corporate bureaucracy. Children require more than just a roof over their heads, Jack stated firmly. They need love, stability, and an environment where they can flourish. I can do that. I will do that. The second social worker gave him a sidelong glance, their pen scratching notes quietly on a clipboard. She glanced from him to the sleeping boys, their innocence draped under the lullaby of night. For just a moment, Jack wondered if they saw the flicker of hope in his eyes, or if they only perceived a man clutching at the fragile threads of a desperate situation. Concern began to shift into determination as Jack articulated his vision. He spoke of his drive to form support networks, of outreach efforts to create awareness. Each point he raised ignited sparks of aspiration within him. As he embraced this new purpose, he felt warmth spread through his chest, a feeling that had long taken a back seat to his corporate ambition. After what felt like an eternity, they concluded their visit, promising to return after a thorough evaluation. As they departed, Jack leaned heavily against the doorframe, the question swirling in his mind. Had he really made an impact? Would his next steps resonate with his vision, or would he find the system's weight too grueling to bear? Alone again in the quiet, Jack returned to the boys' room, where the soft breaths filled the air. He stood for a long moment observing their peaceful sleep, as if by watching them he could anchor himself to this fleeting moment of clarity. In the quiet of their room, a sudden resolution hit him. He would not merely fight, he would also disrupt. Tomorrow would be the day he would start to mobilize resources. Not just for the boys, but to voice a challenge against a system that often overlooked such vulnerable lives. The seed of change was planted in the fertile ground of determination, and with each heartbeat, he realized he was laying the foundational stones not just for their future, but for his redeveloped self. As dawn chased away the remnants of night, Jack prepared himself. He would seize control of this narrative, audience be damned. There would be meetings, discussions, and a deeper engagement with everyone he knew. Each conversation would bring clarity, though the road might be treacherous. But as the sun rose, casting shadows across the room, a chilling thought crawled into the corners of his mind. What if the very system he aimed to confront was fortified against those who dared to challenge it? Would he truly be able to withstand the obstacles that lay ahead? The reality of this struggle was becoming clearer, and Jack felt the weight of what lay in wait. Tomorrow would bring decisions that could spiral either toward triumph or despair. The battle was just beginning, and each moment danced precariously on the edge of uncertain outcomes. The air felt crisp as Jack prepared for the day ahead, a mixture of excitement and trepidation swirling within him. He stared at his reflection in the mirror, waiting for a sign of the determination he felt brewing inside. The morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the small kitchen that had become both a haven and a battleground. Here he would forge his path forward. He poured himself a cup of coffee, the steam swirling upward, almost beckoning him to join the rising ambition.
What began as a self-imposed quest to protect the triplets was transforming into a mission of broader significance. Taking a moment to breathe deeply, he reflected on the necessary first step: gathering his network. These resources could be pivotal in creating momentum, but the thought of reaching out triggered a knot of hesitation in his stomach. In the corporate world, Jack had navigated rooms filled with powerful individuals, effortlessly influencing decisions. Yet here he was, shrouded in self-doubt, quaking at the idea of vulnerability. This wasn't just about professional accolades, this was personal. What if his overtures for support were met with indifference, or worse, condescension? Shaking off the fear, he grabbed his phone, fingers hovering over the contacts list, letting the anxiety morph into determination. He reached out to one of his former colleagues, Lisa, who had always been supportive. "Hey Lisa, can we meet today?" "Sure, Jack," she replied, her voice warm and inviting, reassuring him in a way he desperately needed. With a plan forming, Jack forced himself to envision the meeting. They would discuss the triplets, the challenges he faced, and how she might help. As the clock ticked closer to their meeting time, each passing minute heightened his awareness of how far he had transitioned from corporate overlord to a man seeking fundamental change in the world. Lives of 3 innocent children. On the way to the cafe, a powerful storm brewed inside him. Not a storm of fear, but of resolve. Jack rehearsed the conversation in his head, eyes on the road, envisioning the solidarity he hoped to establish. When he arrived, Lisa was already sitting at a corner table, sunlight reflecting off her coffee cup. "Jack!" she greeted energetically, rising to embrace him. Their exchange turned quickly to business, and he shared the full depth of the social worker's encounter. Her expression shifted from supportive curiosity to unwavering determination. "You can't navigate this alone. We need a strategy," she said, her brow knitting together as she leaned in. For the next hour, they mapped out a plan that included social media outreach, information sessions, and community engagement. Ideas flowed as Jack disclosed not only his fears, but also the insights he had gleaned about the system they aimed to confront. To his surprise, he discovered a latent skill for strategic planning he hadn't recognized before. His mind unraveled complexities and plotted ways to outmaneuver a rigid establishment. At a certain moment, Lisa paused, looking him squarely in the eye. "Jack, this isn't just about the triplets anymore. You've got a whole narrative to shape. People need to hear your story and what's at stake." Her words hit him deeply, awakening something that had been dormant since he had stepped into the corporate grind. He felt like a man finally breaking free from the constraints of his past self, rediscovering the essence of who he was meant to be. They finalized a compelling message outlining the need for systemic change, and Jack's heart raced with enthusiasm. Yet, as they left the cafe, reality seeped in. The palpable weight of the system loomed large, taunting him with the thought of unyielding resistance and bureaucratic indifference. Would they truly listen? As he drove home, his determination wrestled with gnawing doubt. The stark, clear view of the road ahead sharpened his focus. The boys were asleep, but soon they would awaken to a world potentially reshaped by their father's efforts. He felt the responsibility pressing down, yet it invigorated him. Each step forward would be one filled with complexities, fraught with revelations about his character and what he was willing to endure for their sake. But was he fully prepared for the obstacles awaiting him? In that moment, his phone buzzed with an incoming message that would soon unveil whether his endeavor would soar or stumble. The battle lines were drawn, and the real game was just beginning. Jack sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight casting long shadows across the floor, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling in his mind. The message from Lisa had come through, an invitation to a community meeting about child welfare initiatives. His heart raced as he read her words again, tinged with urgency and hope. The meeting was not just a call to action, it was an opportunity for him to step into the shoes of the advocate he was slowly learning to become. Still, doubt crept in. Could he handle the spotlight? Would his voice resonate in a room full of seasoned activists? These thoughts gnawed at him like children pulling at his sleeve, each one a reminder of his amateur status in this new arena. He envisioned the faces of the triplets, their innocent eyes, and the weight of their future rested heavily on him. The thought sent him spiraling into a moment of introspection that left him shaken. He needed to approach this meeting with purpose. He knew that. He grabbed a pen and a notebook, jotting down key points he wanted to make, the systemic failures he observed, real-life anecdotes from the triplets, and what he believed could spark change. As his pen flowed across the page, he felt a surge of confidence, not unlike the feeling of preparing for a major business presentation in the boardroom. Yet, this was different. Here, the stakes ran deeper than profit margins. It cut to the core of his identity, and for the first time, he understood the raw power of vulnerability. What if he faced rejection? Or worse, what if he was ridiculed? The tension in his chest tightened, but rather than cower, he embraced it, letting it morph into something constructive. Speaking from the heart, a small voice in him whispered, "Is the only way to truly connect." As the clock approached meeting time, Jack dressed deliberately, choosing a crisp white shirt that felt like armor. The drive felt longer this time, the world outside his window a blur of muted colors. When he parked and stepped into the community center, an electric atmosphere greeted him. The room was pulsating with the hum of conversations blending into a cacophony of passionate voices. Lisa spotted him from across the room and waved him over. "Here's our rising star," she teased jovially, but her sincerity pierced through his residual hesitations. The meeting began, and each presentation brought forth impassioned pleas for reforms, statistics, stories, each one inching Jack closer to the moment he had envisioned. When his turn approached, his palms became clammy. Internal dialogue sprang forth. Did he belong in this conversation? How would he even start? As he stood before the audience, he glanced at Lisa, who gave him an encouraging nod. Breathing in deeply, he launched into his narrative. His voice trembled at first, the words catching in his throat, but as he described the triplets' plight, how their laughter masked fears and the unseen burdens they carried, he felt something stir inside him. With every detail laid bare, he tested the waters of his own vulnerability. He spoke of the flawed systems, shining a light on areas that needed not just reform, but empathy and consideration. He articulated a vision for change, one where their stories wouldn't be silenced. It was surreal, stepping into this new role, and he could see acknowledgement ripple through the audience. But the moment was fleeting. As he
Wrapped up, a voice from the back of the room cut through the applause, a skeptic prodding him. "But what makes you think you can enact real change, Jack? You're just a businessman." His heart sank, and doubt flooded in like tidal waves. The question cut deeper than expected. The vulnerability he had just shared felt like a chink in his armor. It forced him to confront his fears again. Who was he really, without his titles, without the accolades of his past? Taking a deep breath, he gazed out at the audience, searching for compassion. "Because I'm a father." The words rolled off his tongue, settling heavy in the air. The response was immediate. A wave of murmurs swept over the audience. Jack realized then that this wasn't only about proving his credibility, but staking a claim on a shared humanity. Silence replaced skepticism, and in that moment he understood that his story was his greatest asset. It was a profound revelation, bolstering the person he aspired to become. As the meeting concluded, Jack felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. His journey was just beginning, and while the confrontation had shaken him, it also laid the groundwork for deeper connections and unexpected alliances. He stepped outside, the cool air bracing him. The challenges were far from over, but the embers of awakening were alive and thriving. Just then his phone buzzed again, a message from a prominent local journalist interested in his story. As he stared at the screen, a mixture of excitement and apprehension washed over him.
This could either amplify his voice or expose him to deeper scrutiny. But one thing was clear: the stakes had never felt higher. What had begun as an effort to save 3 innocent children was swirling into something larger, a public narrative that demanded to be shaped. What had he inadvertently signed up for? Jack's heart raced as he processed the journalist's request. His fingers hovered over the screen, torn between the thrill of opportunity and the fear of exposure. What had begun as a personal crusade was quickly becoming a public affair, and he was grappling with the weight of that transformation. He had never planned to share so intimately about his struggles and his commitment to the triplets. Each moment felt like an uncomfortable unraveling of his carefully constructed persona. Taking a seat at a nearby bench, Jack allowed the cool evening air to seep into his skin, hoping it would calm his racing thoughts. This was about more than just his voice being amplified, he realized. It was about the future of the triplets and others like them who needed champions. In that quiet moment, he thought about what had led him here. The triplets had awakened a part of him long dormant, a paternal drive swathed in the chaos of his former life. As he stared blankly at his phone, a sudden flash of emotion surged within him, fear laced with determination. In that swirl, he recognized a
new resolve forming, pushing him to confront not only external challenges, but the internal doubts that echoed louder now than ever. Who was he to step into the light when he hadn't yet mastered the darkness within? He pulled out his notebook, scribbled thoughts dancing on the page. In the days since the meeting, fragments of insights had emerged. It wasn't just about being a businessman or a father. It was about being an advocate, someone who understood the depth of the struggles he spoke of. He had navigated corporate landscapes, but this was different. He could no longer view the world through a lens of numbers. It was about humanity more than profit statements. Be authentic, a voice from his past whispered, pulling him back to a lesson his mentor had once tried to instill in him. But how could he be authentic if he was still wrestling with his identity? What if he couldn't find that voice in front of the camera? The idea that he might falter again gripped him with anxiety. Yet he had to confront that fear. He had come too far to retreat back into the shadows. Resisting the pull of doubt, he decided to call Lisa. Maybe she could help him navigate this next step. As the phone rang, he mentally rehearsed the conversation, finding a balance between candor and strategy. When Lisa answered, her voice was warm and inviting. "Jack, what's up?" Taking a deep breath, he shared his thoughts on the journalist's message and how it made him feel. "It's like the stakes have soared. I feel completely exposed." "We're all exposed, Jack," she countered gently. "Every time we choose to stand up for something we believe in, we expose ourselves to judgment. That's strength, not weakness." Her words resonated, but didn't alleviate all his concern. How do I turn my story into something that resonates without losing what's personal? He needed tangible guidance, a way to articulate his experience without drowning in vulnerability. "Share your heart," she replied firmly. "Your temptations are normal, but remember, your authenticity is what connects. You may be a businessman, but think about the father first. That connection is strong, and people will resonate with your truth." As he hung up, he felt a spark of clarity dawning within him. Maybe shedding titles and embracing raw honesty was the key. With renewed determination, he dove into research. The more stories he consumed, the more he began to see the potential structure of his own narrative. This wasn't just about how to speak, it was about the journey of connecting deeply with others, learning to make real demands of the status quo. But he was not naive. He could almost hear the faint echoes of skepticism from that first meeting. Would they only see a businessman still trying to play savior? 2 days later, his phone buzzed again, this time revealing an invitation for an interview. The venue, a local television station eager for human interest stories. Apprehension gripped him, but in a twist of fate, it cloaked him in something inexplicably invigorating. Taking one last look at his reflection in the hallway mirror, he muttered a mantra that had become grounding. "I'm a father, and I'm here to speak for them." But even as he prepared, an unsettling thought flickered through his mind. What if sharing his truth did more than reveal vulnerability? What if it unearthed something darker within himself? As he stepped outside, he wasn't just walking toward a chance to advocate. He was striding toward a confrontation with truths he had yet to fully comprehend. The moment begged for resolution, but loomed with uncertainty. Would he emerge stronger or face his deepest fears? The camera awaited, but so did the unknown. Jack paced back and forth in the dimly lit green room, the nerves buzzing through him like electricity. Outside the door, a live audience awaited, and the flicker of studio lights could be seen spilling through the cracks. It was a world so different from the one he knew, the cutthroat style of board meetings and the impersonal nature of profit margins. This was raw, stripped down to the heart of what it truly meant to connect. One thought remained constant in his mind. He couldn't return to the silence that had defined so much of his life. He had to speak. There was simply no other option. The journalist's initial request echoed in his head, but this time, instead of fear, it fueled a sense of commitment. He was not just stepping into that spotlight for himself. He was doing it for the triplets, for their future, and for the countless others who remained unheard. The warm-up host, a bubbly personality with a penchant for storytelling, swung open the door, beckoning him into the studio. Jack's heart thudded beneath his shirt. He stepped over the threshold, feeling like a soldier stepping onto the battlefield, ready to confront whatever awaited him. The questions loomed in his mind. Would he be able to articulate his passion? Would he reveal the depth of his commitment without collapsing into self-doubt? As he took his seat across from the anchor, whose eyes sparkled with curiosity, Jack had an intriguing realization. This was not a performance. This was a dialogue, a shared exchange of experiences. He had spent too long in corporate confines, drowning in charts and percentages. This platform was a door to empathy, a space where his own vulnerabilities could ignite connection. "Jack, thank you for being here. You've taken quite an interest in the lives of those 3 triplets. Can you tell us how this journey began?" Jack's breath caught, and he felt the weight of the moment. "Sure," he said, his voice steadier than he expected. "My journey began as an exploration of myself, really. These triplets were struggling to survive, but they awakened something in me. I didn't realize how much I had suppressed my own paternal instincts until I met them." He began to recount their story, the difficulties they faced, and his own struggles with being present. The words flowed, encased in raw emotion. As he spoke, he became acutely aware of how much he was transforming in real time. Each sentence peeled away layers of professional stoicism, revealing a depth to his identity he hadn't fully embraced until this moment. "Are you worried that being candid about your struggles may make you seem lenient or weak in the eyes of the corporate world?" the anchor probed, eyes trained on him. Jack paused, feeling an all-too-familiar wave of doubt rise. But then he remembered Lisa's words, "Share your heart." "I suppose I've spent so long trying to prove something to others, to hide my vulnerability, but I'm learning that leaving that facade behind opens up more powerful connections. This isn't about appearing strong all the time. It's about being true." As he continued, he noticed how the audience's expressions shifted. Faces softened, and he could sense the collective breath as listeners engaged with his narrative. Their reactions manifested into a shared empathy that emboldened him further. The interview prompted deeper revelations within Jack. He understood that embracing vulnerability was not a liability, but a strength. It wasn't merely a story being told, it was a catharsis taking place in the collective energy of the conversation. He was not simply advocating for the triplets, he was advocating for every person who felt lost and unheard. As the discussion moved towards the impact of his actions on the triplets and the obstacles that lay ahead, Jack noticed a flicker of realization.
He wasn't just a businessman turned advocate. He had become a bridge for change, a father figure not just for the triplets, but also for other lost souls seeking guidance. Finally, as the interview wound down, the anchor leaned in with a penetrating gaze. "What do you believe is the next step in your journey to help these children?" Jack's heart raced anew, not with fear, but with a sense of possibility. "The next step is to start a conversation. I want to push for systemic changes that address the needs of children like the triplets, not just in my city, but everywhere. It's time we challenge the status quo." But an unsettling truth lingered deep within him. What if this surge of purpose overshadowed the unresolved struggles within himself? As he left the studio, a quiet voice warned him that the battle against his own darkest fears was far from over. As he stepped outside into the cool evening air, he felt the weight of impending challenges, as if shadows lurked just beyond his reach. The audience had connected with his truth, but now he sensed a new tension building. Could he handle the demands of a larger mission without overshadowing his essential journey of personal resolution? The path forward lay uncertain, but one thing was palpable. The real challenge had just begun. Would he rise to meet it, or find himself lost in the echo of expectations?
Stepping out into the crisp night air, Jack felt the buzz of the street around him, a cacophony of life that felt both invigorating and suffocating at the same time. He had shared his truth, yet the moment faded faster than he anticipated, leaving him with a gnawing sense of anticipation and dread about what lay ahead. The warmth of the studio lights was quickly replaced by the cold disconnect of reality. Jack's thoughts tumbled over one another as he walked down the nearly deserted street, the soft crunch of gravel beneath his shoes echoing his internal conflict. He wasn't just an advocate now, he was a figurehead, a symbol of hope. The weight of expectations pressed down on him, reminding him that he had made a commitment that was now inescapable. But alongside the exhilaration, shadows from his past loomed, self-doubt creeping back into the cracks where newfound strength had begun to build. His phone buzzed with a message from Lisa, a reminder of their meeting tomorrow to discuss strategic next steps for the triplets. The thought of it sent a fresh wave of uncertainty coursing through him. A part of him was terrified of not fulfilling this mission he had set for himself. What if he stumbled? What if he didn't have the resources needed to make a real difference? His mind churned over these and other questions, weighing the future against his own self-awareness. Did he truly understand the challenges that lay ahead? Was he prepared to face multifaceted problems that extended far beyond the immediate struggles of the triplets? That night, sleep eluded him. He tossed and turned, wrestling with his thoughts, each one surfacing unbidden, fragments of fears, images of the triplets, and voices of critics that echoed in the recesses of his mind. He could feel the pressure building, welling up inside him, a tension that was becoming unbearable. His heart raced as he thought of failing them, as a father figure, as an advocate. Morning came, carrying with it the same anxious anticipation that had kept him awake. In the shower, he inhaled deeply, trying to wash away the self-doubt that clung to him like a shadow. He needed clarity, needed to reconnect with the purpose that had ignited this journey. Jack understood that to create change, he must start with himself, address his fears head-on. Arriving at the coffee shop for his meeting with Misa brought with it an odd mix of comfort and anxiety. As he entered, he saw her in the corner, animatedly discussing something with a colleague. Observing her, he felt both admiration and a pang of inadequacy. Was he equipped to lead this initiative alongside her, to navigate the tumultuous waters of advocacy and philanthropy? When she turned to greet him, the warmth in her smile eased some of his anxiety. They settled into a discussion about logistics, timelines, and potential partnerships that could amplify their cause. Yet with each topic, Jack's sense of urgency grew. He found himself wanting to delve to consider not just strategies, but also the emotional landscape surrounding these efforts. "Jack," Lisa began, a keen look in her eye,
I know you're passionate about this, but we need to break down what sustainable change really looks like. You can't carry this burden alone." Her words jarred him. He had been so focused on the mission, on being the unwavering leader, that he hadn't considered the importance of vulnerability when it came to collaboration. He had told the audience about sharing his heart, yet here he was, still trying to convince himself he had to be a solitary champion. Their conversation shifted, and Jack challenged himself to confront this notion. What if I'm scared that if I open up, I show weakness where I need to show strength? I feel as though they need someone unwavering. "But Jack, showing them that you're human is a strength," she said gently. "Opening up fosters connection. We're not just trying to raise awareness, we're trying to inspire action." As her words sank in, a revelation unfurled within him. Perhaps leaning into his vulnerability could be the key that unlocked a deeper commitment, not only from himself, but from those he hoped to influence. He needed to embrace the complexities of leadership, allowing himself to be both strong and human, a balance of authority and relatability. With renewed determination, he nodded. "Okay. Let's push for the deeper stories. Let's show the world what's at stake. Let's not just evoke sympathy, let's spark action." As they began to sketch out their next steps, Jack felt the tremors of uncertainty fade, replaced by a growing clarity. He was no longer just a businessman advocating for change. He was becoming a person committed to transformation in every sense. Yet, as they finalized their plans, another thought nagged at him. What if opening up brought consequences he wasn't ready to face? The possibility loomed that his authenticity could lead him down roads of deeper scrutiny and judgment. Unbeknownst to him, the spotlight was now on something within himself that required resolution, a journey intertwined with the fight for the triplets. As they wrapped up, Jack looked at Lisa, a newfound sense of purpose surging through him. This was just the beginning. He was on the brink of something monumental. Would he find the courage to confront not just external challenges, but also the silent battles raging within? The morning of possibility pulsed with suspense, propelling him toward a pivotal moment that would reveal the true depths of who he was becoming. As Jack stood to leave the coffee shop, he felt the weight of purpose pressing firmly against his chest. The conversation had ignited a flame within him, but with every step away from Lisa, he sensed that the real test lay ahead. His heart raced, fueled by the dual forces of exhilaration and anxiety. What if he faltered on this journey? The fresh air greeted him as he stepped outside, yet it did little to dispel
the heaviness that hung in the back of his mind. Jack felt the echoes of the opposite ends of his consciousness battling once more, resolve on one side, panic on the other. He had chosen to embrace vulnerability, but a haunting thought lingered. What if this choice made him weak in the eyes of those he sought to inspire? Determined to cement his newfound clarity, Jack pulled out his phone, scrolling through notes and reminders he had collected over the past weeks. He began drafting an outline for a personal blog series, an intimate portrait of the triplets' lives combined with stories of his own struggles and triumphs. The act of crafting his thoughts into words offered a therapeutic release, channeling his complex emotions into a tangible format. Yet, the moment he began to type, self-doubt rushed back in. The screen felt like a void, mocking him with its emptiness as he questioned the validity of his voice. Was he experienced enough to pen down his insights? Could he articulate the stories in a way that would resonate? Jack paused, staring at the blinking cursor, each flash amplifying the nagging conviction that he wasn't ready. A hot wave of frustration crashed over him.
The fear of failure manifested as an overwhelming urge to retreat into a shell, a familiar instinct he had fought against when stepping onto that stage. Clenching his jaw, he recalled the faces of the triplets. They needed him. He couldn't let this moment of conflict keep him from the mission ahead. It was time to prove to himself that he was capable of inspiring change. With a deep breath, he forced himself to write, each keystroke a declaration of his commitment. The narrative flowed more freely than he'd expected, intertwining personal anecdotes with the larger plight of those he sought to help. As he crafted sentence after sentence, Jack started to recognize a hidden competency emerging. The act of writing invigorated him, solidifying the bond between his experiences and those of the triplets. Suddenly, he saw the narrative not just about himself, but as a collective journey towards hope and resilience. By the time he hit send, tears pricked at the corners of his eyes. Torn between vulnerability and fear, he had allowed himself to be fully seen. But as he closed his laptop, a feeling of completeness surged within him, only to be interrupted by a frantic call from Lisa. "Jack, we need to meet. There's something happening at the shelter where the triplets are staying." Instantly his heart dropped, dread mingling with concern. What was happening? Had there been a setback? The urgency in her voice sent a ripple of anxiety coursing through him, and he had to shove aside the victory of his earlier moment. After hastily making arrangements to meet Lisa, Jack felt the adrenaline prickling at the back of his neck. Against the soothing warmth of his accomplished writing, a stark reality was bearing down on him. The road ahead was fraught with challenges that could
shake the very foundation of his dedication to the triplets. More than just a guardian of their future, he was now entwined in their immediate struggles, his existence tied to theirs by the fragile thread of hope. As he navigated the streets towards the shelter, the questions began again, gnawing at him. What would this dilemma reveal about his purpose? Was he prepared for the weight of responsibility that came with the territory of being a figurehead? The deeper realization hit him that these questions, while terrifying, were parts of a larger journey, a pilgrimage toward not just championing a cause, but discovering the myriad ways he could grow with those he sought to uplift. But with each step, he also felt the tension brewing. Would he rise to meet the moments unfolding before him, or would fear dictate his next actions? As he approached the shelter, the air thickened with tension. It was now a matter of time before he discovered how stark the reality could truly be, and whether he had the fortitude to face it, both for himself and the triplets. Jack Thompson stood at the entrance of the Maplewood shelter, the complexities of emotions surging through him like a relentless tide. Each step inside echoed with the pressing urgency of his mission, the stakes larger than ever. The comforting facade of the coffee meeting with Lisa had all but faded, replaced by a knot of apprehension in his gut. He was no longer just a man advocating for the triplets. He now embodied their future, their lifeline amid the swirling uncertainties of a system stacked against them. His eyes darted around the room, seeking familiar faces, as murmurs of distress filled the air. Lisa spotted him and rushed over, her expression a mixture of anxiety and determination. "Jack, I'm so glad you came," she said, grabbing his arm. "The situation with the triplets has escalated. We need to act quickly." "Tell me everything," Jack urged, tuning in to her urgency and desperately scanning the room for the boys. "The shelter is facing funding issues, and there's talk of relocating the kids. We need to mobilize support immediately." Jack felt a rush of emotions unraveling within him. The thought of the boys being uprooted was a harsh reality he had envisioned but never accepted. This was the moment that would either solidify his commitment or fracture it entirely. It was time to confront every fear, every doubt he had suppressed for the sake of this fight. Without hesitation, he responded, "Let's get everyone on board. We'll launch a campaign to raise awareness. We can't let them vanish into the void. Those boys need stability." Jack's voice held a steady resolve, a marked contrast to the turmoil brewing within him. Lisa nodded, her eyes wide with hope. "We can collaborate with local organizations, maybe get the media involved, amplify our message."
Jack felt invigorated, the spark of action lighting a fire beneath his feet. He began outlining their campaign on a nearby whiteboard, sketching
connections to community leaders, potential sponsors, and advocacy groups he had gathered over the past weeks. The more he listed, the more he felt that familiar sense of purpose returning. This was not just about saving 3 boys. This was about facing the self-imposed boundaries he had long adhered to. As ideas bounced back and forth, Jack tapped into the power that lay in vulnerability. With each new proposal, he infused elements that were deeply personal. The triplets were not merely subjects of a narrative. They represented the depths he himself had faced, the longing for stability, the necessity of love, and the pressing need for human connection amid chaos. It was cathartic, a release of emotions that had been simmering under the surface since the moment he had first brought the boys into his life. After hours of brainstorming and planning, the mood around them shifted from despair to determination. Lisa smiled, her face radiating enthusiasm. "You've really brought us all together, Jack. This is more than just a fight to keep the boys here. It's a movement to reshape how we view and support vulnerable children." Jack felt a swell of pride coursing through him. A true transformation had emerged. This was no longer about seeking validation from corporate peers. He had embraced a cause that ignited his core. He had learned to combine strength with authenticity, melding his past with the future he wanted to forge, not just for the triplets, but for every child grappling with systemic injustices. News outlets began covering the campaign. Accolades from community stakeholders flooded in, and passionate voices joined the call for reform. Jack's vulnerability had ignited a ripple of empathy. People were moved to fuel their community engagement. For the first time, he wasn't wearing a mask of professionalism. He was alive, dynamic, and genuine. As their movement gained momentum, Jack received an unexpected message from the social workers. They had taken notice of the rising public support and would meet to reassess the situation regarding the triplets. The potential existed to keep them within the shelter, fortified for their future. The day of the meeting dawned, and Jack stood outside the shelter, surrounded by supporters carrying signs, their collective energies pulsating with anticipation. Among them, he spotted the triplets, their smiles brightening his heart. In that moment, he understood that the journey had come full circle. It had begun with a longing to save 3 boys, but now it had evolved into a powerful narrative of transformation, not just for them, but for himself. Jack had conquered his fears, proved his worth through action, and ascended beyond a businessman into a herald of hope. When he spoke before the renewed council of social workers, he no longer felt the familiar shadows of doubt inching in. Instead, Jack became a beacon of truth, steady, resolute. We are not merely advocating for these 3 boys. We are demanding a system that recognizes their worth, their potential, and their right to a safe, loving environment. They deserve the future we've all dreamed of. In that moment, Jack Thompson was no longer just an architect of buildings. He was the architect of change, a man who transformed his life through the power of love, hope, and resilience. As the meeting concluded, the boys were confirmed to remain at the shelter, built stronger by a community that rose to defend them. Jack felt warmth spread through him anew. He had achieved more than he could have imagined. His journey had led him to a profound truth. It wasn't about the accolades or titles, but lifting others as he soared. Standing among the smiling crowd, Jack realized he was now more than a successful businessman. He was part of a family that transcended traditional bonds. The future was now fortified with love, stability, and a newfound purpose. Jack had won not just the battle to keep the boys. He had conquered his own battles, redefining himself through authentic connection. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment their reactions and theories about the ending.
Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.